challenge that we face is that, broadly put, economics is being run by the Canberra Party. And the Canberra Party is, at the moment, the coalition. It is the Labor Party, it is the senior echelons of the public service. It is mediated by the opinions of Fairfax, it is mediated by the opinions of universities, of the senior public service. And by and large, that has failed us. Nothing upsets me more, well, as you can tell already from the 15 minutes I've been talking, a lot of things upset me. But one of the things that concerns me is when politicians go up and say, we created 100,000 jobs, 150,000 jobs. No, no, no. Unless, of course, they're talking about the NDIS, which is our taxes creating those jobs. People create jobs, entrepreneurs create jobs, people take risks to create jobs. It is not the government, it is not the state. This is an entire mindset that I think we have to change. You can argue, and as Tom said, we've had 26, 27 years of uninterrupted economic growth. You can argue when the malaise set in. You can argue the malaise set in after 2007 with the election of the Rudd government. For me, with my background in political history, I think it goes back a little bit further. I think it goes back to the Chifley government and the beginning of the Menzies government. In the 40s, it goes back to the second uniform tax case, which gave the High Court power to overturn the Constitution and centralise more things in Canberra. Some of us, if I was a little bit more libertarian, would go back to the 1st of January 1901. I would argue the Constitution as currently conceived has not served freedom. It has not served the intention of the founders. It has not served competitive federalism. There's no such thing as states' rights. People have rights. The reason why you want a state government or a local government, if they have to regulate, to be more likely to regulate than the federal government is, that gives us more control, more accountability, and is more transparent. I think if we are going to overturn the precepts of the Constitution, then we should do a lot more than just tinker at the edges, but that is a debate for another day. As you know, this year the Commonwealth Government is going to confiscate $400 billion of our money. Commonwealth gross debt is $534 billion. I don't need to tell you, people in this room, that gross debt, net debt, is a tax on future generations. That is why I think there's been an upsurge of interest, of commitment from young people, not just because they're prevailing against the current orthodoxy of left liberalism, but they're understanding that the current generation has impoverished them. As KPMG pointed out, and I don't often quote consultants, but I will because in this case their argument serves my purpose, more than half of Australian taxpayers are net tax takers, i.e. They take more in welfare than they pay in tax. This is unsustainable for a democracy. And what do we get for it? We get a $90 billion NBN program that we know is already out of date. We get a $60 billion submarine program designed to save 2 federal seats in South Australia. We get a $55 billion program on schools, which will simply see standards decline further. We have huge challenges. Private investment right now in Australia is at the lowest levels since Gough Whitlam. Our economic competitiveness is declining. 10 years ago, in the World Economic Forum standards, again, I'll quote them because it serves my purposes, I was disappointed when Donald Trump did decide to go to Davos. I thought that's why people elected him not to go, but anyway. Australia was ranked 9th. Now we are ranked 21st. The rate of company formation, new companies being formed, is at its lowest level in 10 years. When bureaucrats turn their mind to these challenges of red tape, of regulation, they are confused. There was a Commonwealth Department of Industry report on entrepreneurship in Australia, and the authors identified that small businesses are being started at the smallest rate, as I said, of any time in the last 10 years. And the authors said this was puzzling. It was puzzling that less small businesses are being started now in Australia than ever before, because at the same time as this is occurring, government spending is increasing. They said it was puzzling. They could not understand how government was getting bigger while at the same time businesses were declining in number. Red tape is a fundamental challenge to our freedom, not just in terms of the costs that it imposes, but in terms of the way in which it implies a bureaucrat is better able to make a decision about our own businesses, about our own farms, about our own families, better than we are ourselves. Last year we passed 3,500 pages of legislation in the federal parliament, which doesn't even include subordinate legislation. The cost of red tape is conservatively estimated by the IPA to be $176 billion a year. That's 11% of GDP. Red tape is now Australia's largest industry, and it is so pleasing that Senator Leon Helm is now, for the first time in the Senate's history, leading a Senate inquiry into the costs of red tape. This is very important, and it wouldn't have happened without the Senator leading that charge. Red tape is administered by more than 1,100 government entities. 400 of them were established by the Rudd-Gillard governments. Since it was elected, the Coalition has abolished no more than a couple of dozen. All of these are impositions on our freedom. We can talk about the 22,000 pages of the environmental impact statement that Adani has had to complete to start their coal mine. We can talk about the 4,000 permits that the Roy Hill iron ore mine in WA has had to endure. Or we can talk about the 847 hours that it takes for someone in New South Wales to train to be a hairdresser. We can talk about the 72 licences that it takes for someone to open a restaurant in New South Wales. So it's no surprise that 68% of businesses think they are over-regulated. These are huge challenges. How do we confront these challenges? As I said, I think it's at a number of levels. It's about having more voices, not less voices in the debate. It's about understanding the current and long-term challenges. Some of the current challenges, for example, involve something as basic and yet as dangerous as the Commonwealth's new proposed so-called electoral reforms, which would basically put within the purview of the government, i.e. the Australian Electoral Commission, what we say when we express a political opinion. I find it very interesting and amusing that GetUp and other left-wing organisations are now complaining and talking about government control over their actions, and I think those organisations do have a point. I think this legislation is very dangerous, and I can go into more detail about it later.